So plan for today, plan for, actually, yeah, today is the right fucking descriptor. This isn't like a late ass, late ass 9 o'clock at night lift. I'm talking, it's only 1:49. This is good. This is good to be ahead of the game with that kind of stuff. But for today's lift with back, I can tell that my traps are a little bit extra fatigued than they usually would be, especially on the day of a back day. So I think part of that was the fact that last back day I made a note, or I made made kind of a specific act to really make it row focused and make use of a lot of the rowing machines that this gym has. So I think I may have I mean, not overdone it, but hit my mid traps and everything else enough to the point where it probably warrants a maybe a slightly more lat focused day today, which I don't mind. So whether that's all pull downs, we'll just have to see. There's with rows, at least, usually machines end up doing it for me a lot more than just a regular dumbbell row or a barbell row. Would you count a cable row as a machine? I think I probably would. So even cable rows too. I mean, it's like cable rows and a lot of the rowing machines, just having that movement path already set up and controlled for you, it does feel like it ends up working a little better for me. Or at least I can really squeeze harder. But with pull downs and any lat focused work, sometimes the machines don't work as well for me. And I'm not saying they don't work, like I don't feel my lats, but if I've got the choice and I know I want to do something lat focused, usually my first two options end up being just some kind of pull down, or maybe like a cable pullover, or maybe a single arm pull down on the cables, things like that. So it's this lift might end up being a little bit simpler, because even if all I wanted to do was sit down on the lat pull down for all however many sets I end up doing, let's say 7, 8 or so, if all I wanted to do was sit on that pull down with a couple of different attachments, I would be perfectly happy, because I wouldn't just do the same set of like a straight bar push pull down with for 15 reps or something and then a couple partials. Like, you can completely change a movement just by what style of set you end up doing. So I can do a light squeezing set, much slower reps, and then on the complete opposite spectrum, I can do kind of a heavier set and be a little more forceful with it, really get the weight kind of moving up and down, kind of more so maximizing the tension in my lats and like the overall workload, rather than a deep contracting squeeze at the bottom. And I think bouncing around all those styles on a lift by lift basis is probably your best bet. I mean, it would just make sense, that if you can do different sets to failure, some with really heavy weight, leveraging the loading aspect of things, or some with even, very lightweight and really just trying to make the reps more difficult by your execution of them, then that's about right, But there is, like with everything, there is probably a sweet spot somewhere right in the middle. And if you branch off too far away from that sweet spot, then you're probably cutting into your gains a touch, or at least cutting into your overall like stimulus that these sets are giving you. Do I think a 1 rep max on a deadlift for, let's say you did 3 1 rep maxes as like a deadlift workout, 3 top singles if you were a power lifter, do I think that's really going to be as beneficial as spending that exact same energy on like pull downs and pullovers? Not totally certain, because of course that's going to be a crazy amount of force being exerted by your lats and your traps and everything else, but is it enough to be really hypertrophy stimulating? Is kind of I'm not so convinced. Or else every lift I would just come in and try to do 1 rep maxes of tricep push downs or squat and bench and everything else. It's just not the case. And on the other side of that, if you're doing a weight that's so light that if you were to hit failure, you'd have to do like 50 reps, then you're probably cutting it a little too light, and now you're not really even doing a hard set, you're just kind of moving weight around. And it's a very fine line between those two states of being. And a lot of the times, I think some of these guys don't really know what side of that fence they're really on. I mean, I'm sure they think they're on the side of really working out, but you know, anybody can just pick up a pair of 30s, do 10 curls, and then put them down on the rack. You maybe even pretend that the last one was extra hard. You know, it's not you got to really take it a touch further than that. And I'm not saying like if you do fluff work, you won't get any gains at all. But if you want as much stimulation on these lifts as possible, and you actually make up enough of a dent, let's say, into the wall that is your hypertrophy. Now I'm just saying that whole fucking weird ass analogy. But if you want your sets to reflect how bad you want your gains, then why slack? You know, it's like if you actually get into it to the point where you're doing a bulking phase, or you're dieting down, or you're just main gaining, it's like you've already got one foot in the door. You're driving to the gym, you took your pre-workout, you've got a whole cupboard full of creatine and every other like B12 multivitamin fish oil, and then maybe you've even got your gym bag with like lifting belts, straps, everything else. You're dressed the part. Why wouldn't you try to push it on that last part and really kind of sort of prove to yourself how bad you want it? Which isn't really something I can judge. You know, that's a you situation. But now I'm just now I can tell I'm just going off. I'm starting to think I'm getting a little bit more rambly as this dieting phase continues, because I mean technically I'm running on less than full energy, right? Because I'm trying to burn off all my fat stores that I have in here. So I wonder if it's making me a little more I think it might be making me a touch more rambly. But either way, I'm about 10 minutes out. I'll probably just slam the pre-workout in a couple, and then we can cut to whatever that first set of lats ends up being. And I'm sure we'll have some other kind of tantalizing subject to discuss on the drive back. But let's just get this lift started. Not the full stack, but close. 280 is about the limit. Let me actually pick a different song. Which, at least for me, I mean, I could still work out with no music. Like, I'm not saying I could never do that. But picking the right song to really get you going, I think it can really maybe even change the trajectory of an entire lift. But maybe that's just personal if you're a die-hard, no headphones guy. Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay. Whew. I think one more with that same weight, and then I'm gonna have to go a little lighter. Oh, yeah. Whew. Oh, okay. Let's make this next one lighter with more of a hold of a squeeze. But for this one, I want like a full 1 second hold every rep. Jeez. Oh my God, okay. Oh. I almost said, let's move on. But I think let's do one more right here. Actually, same style, same everything. And then switch to something else. Oh my God. Oh. Oh. Now let's move on. That was a perfect 4, 2 styles. This is lat focused as a lift, kind of as a general theme, but even just on a movement by movement basis, you wouldn't necessarily think seated row. All lats, you think some traps too, but that's where you can kind of finagle what part of your back gets activated depending on how you execute the set, right? So instead of grabbing way out here and then pulling with my elbows flared out, which would really help me bias a lot of mid traps, I'm gonna have a little bit of a narrower grip with my elbows a little further down. And it's like, just zoom in on my upper arm and my body. What is this movement, right? It's like a fucking pullover. So even though I'm now suddenly doing a row, the lat activation may as well be like I'm doing a pullover right here, because I'm pulling my elbow down, not just out, which just kind of changes it a little. But no need to use the full stack. I can get a really good hard squeeze with 220 out of the 300 pounds available, and that is just fine by me. Oh, yeah. Okay. Ooh. That was good, but that was way too heavy. This machine is the perfect example of a strength curve where it gets lighter at the top and heavier at the bottom. Because it's like once I hit a certain amount of fatigue, there are no partial reps. There's just not moving it anymore. Good set though, but I overestimated my strength. Let's drop it to just 160 and really emphasize that squeeze.
There we go. Raw like a shit. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
You ever feel like that motherfuckers always expecting like a flesh? They always think you're this play shit.
Well, hazards of the trade, as it were. Whoops. But now we're cool. So, pull downs as stated. And these ones aren't really, it's not a movement I need to load up, because it's like, it's like whatever, because it's more of a squeeze-based kind of situation. So all I'm really trying to do, well, actually, that's not true. Squeeze and stretch. I'm not just trying to get a good squeeze on the bottom, which I am. I'm also trying to feel my lats really open up to the ceiling at the top. So 70, how does that feel? Yeah, 70 pounds is just about right. So I'll alternate between right side, left side, 5 reps, 5 reps, 5 reps, 5 reps. And then actually, this could be it. If this is a good enough set, this might just be it. Maybe not, but we'll see. Kind of a once you're fully pumped kind of situation. But let's make this shit happen. Okay. Oh my god. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that was good. I know what I want to finish with, though. That was not it. One more over yonder on a seated row. Squeezing, a little faster pace reps, and then we can roll. Okay. All right. Let's go do some lat spreads. Hold on. I can't really see what I'm doing, so I think I'm basically right in frame. I should be in focus, but either way, that was a really good back day. Like just lat spread, even with the shirt. Okay, yeah, right in the middle. Oh. You know, I've kind of gone on record being a little bit of a hater of all the lat focus days and trap focus days. This back pump feels feels pretty fucking nuts, considering it was all basically all lat focused. So maybe this will have to get thrown in. Oh my goodness. Oh. Oh my goodness. Well, back day complete. And now I get to go home a happy camper, knowing that the only thing I have left to do is eat my calories and then probably play some gun game with Mark. Run up a little Black Ops 6. But let's roll. Now all I've got to do is go home, get some food in my system, kind of just chill a little bit. You know, make sure I got all my meals in order so I don't overdo it with my calorie intake. But it's really not the trickiest thing in the world, especially if you get into fucking tracking, because it's like, you know, just how hard is it really to make sure you don't overeat your calorie deficit goal if you're constantly kind of moderating it, you know? Because rather than just like guesswork, rather than just having to think like, okay, well, you know, I want to try to eat healthy today, there's not really any guesswork once you start actually getting into counting your calories, because the numbers will not lie to you. And for some, that's an unfortunate truth, but for others, it's a light to be looked down upon or looked up to when it comes to finding an answer to the trickiness of dieting. Because for me, at least, when I see calorie counting and I see the gist of it, calories in, calories out, just make sure these numbers are aligned, it explains it so well. Like, it takes the magic out of it. I took a wrong turn. I got to keep checking my maps. But it turns it from like some daunting task to be approached vaguely. Excuse me. To be approached vaguely to an actual, like, very simply understandable thing where it's simply, if you do the correct steps, you get the result that you wanted. So it's not a guessing game. So that's where I think the dieting is almost, maybe not easier, but even simpler than the training, because you can train in so many different freaking ways. I mean, you can do all sorts of full body, upper, lower, everything else in between kind of workout splits, but not really a lot of ways to go around the dieting, at least in such a way that you actually get the results that you want, right? Be it bulking up or cutting down. If in either case the numbers don't add up, then it'll simply show in your accounting, and guess what, man? The scale isn't going to change. And that's typically the primary goal of your dieting, right? It's to adjust the what's the word I'm thinking of? Your body composition, right? Be it increasing muscle and fat or just trying to peel off some fat. So if you're not seeing that scale change, then clearly whatever stimulus you're giving yourself calorie-wise isn't up to par with whatever kind of goal you want to achieve there. So in my eyes, that just means simpler the better. I'm not growing. I got to eat more food. I'm not getting any leaner. Better start cutting back. I'd better drop the carbs by 50 grams today. Or, I guess there's a little bit of an extra step. Better just increase the cardio. Right? You're just trying to separate the gap between the amount of energy burned and the amount of energy consumed. Right? That's the balancing act of dieting, maintaining, and bulking. Right? So obviously, if you're eating less than you're burning, you're going to start losing body fat. If you're eating the same that you're burning, you're going to maintain whatever body fat level you're at, and presumably gain a little bit of muscle in the process slowly over time, which for the beginner, I think is the fucking perfect approach. No need for an insane bulk 6 months deep. Hit your protein, lift hard, eat when you're hungry, go from there. And then in a bulking phase, I would typically recommend some of the more advanced lifters where they actually have their training down reasonably pat so that they can actually make use of a good bulking phase. Then you got to make sure you eat more food than you're burning. And in all those cases, whether or not you're actually doing what you're telling yourself that you want to do, it can all be explained when you look at your scale, right? Your weight on the scale over time, because it's not simply a look at yourself in the mirror thing. If you're telling yourself you're bulking up and you looked up online like a maintenance calorie calculator to try to find out just how much food that you need to eat every day to make sure that these weight-based goals are met, then the scale should reflect that, right? You should be heavier than you were last month, and if you're not, then that's kind of the answer right there, right? So if you follow the trail, okay, I'm not gaining weight, I'm the exact same weight on the scale I was a month ago, right? And then you look back to the chart of, okay, if you want to stay the same weight, eat the same amount of food that you burn. Okay, well, if my weight has been the same, then what would that be? Is that the transitive property, I think? Well, something like that. So you're just only eating enough to stay where you are, which is typically kind of a tricky pill to swallow. And a lot of guys really force it. It's just like, you're not eating enough food. What the fuck is wrong with you? It's a bit more complicated than that, because it's not purely food amounts, right? It's food types. It's changing the whole way you even approach dieting as a whole, because you got to now instead of just looking at protein and bread and rice, you're thinking about fats and carbs and proteins and making sure you're getting certain amounts in per day. You got your food scale, you weigh everything. I know it sounds like a lot of extra steps, but all those little things do add up to make the whole situation easier. And even though it feels like a chore, which I know it is. I mean, you are basically studying dieting when you're watching dieting videos and learning about food scales and macros and putting it into practice with yourself, like kind of doing experiments, like how much food do I have to eat if I want to start gaining weight, if I want to start losing weight. Like it's definitely not a passive activity. It does require kind of some active tending and monitoring, plus just overall learning. But I'm not joking. The guys who get it, where I can sit down with somebody and we're talking about different foods and different dieting approaches, it's like, I don't want to start eating until noon, because then it gives me a much shorter eating window. I can eat more food. I could feel more satiated, or like getting into all those little talks like that. Like, these guys have just a little bit of a different view on the dieting, because it's no longer just eating food, and it's not torturing yourself either with crazy calorie restrictions. It's just an understanding that the diet, just like your sleep, just like your hydration, is going to play a massive role, if not one of the biggest roles, on your sort of lifting performance, because that's the fuel for the system, man. You got the engine, you got the battery, you got all all your fluids, and you got your gas. If any of those things are out of whack, your car is not going to turn on, and you're going to have to either bike it or bus it or walk it, depending on how far away whatever thing you're going for is with that little analogy. So I think it's something to consider. Like, if you took any lifter across the board, let's say more beginnerish, year 1.5, whatever, where these guys know about. Let me ask you, all right, if you've been working out for a year, I remember I probably knew all sorts of shit about beta alanine daily amounts and caffeine and like creatine loading and different training frequencies. Like, you think you're a fucking pro. But to take somebody who's a bit of a beginner kind of character, and the only thing that you changed was you gave them like a good, solid, deep understanding of the impact that the food that they're eating is going to have on their training and their trajectory of goals and progress that they're going to be able to reach up to. That guy versus the dude who didn't get that sort of thought process incepted into his mind is going to look very different, right? If those are two parallel realities, where one dude from year one is on his shit with the dieting, and the other guy is like, I do a protein shake, and I get double meat when I go to Chipotle. The differences will be drastic, especially over the course of time. It's like if that car right next to me is only going a mile an hour faster. Look at him. He's already 3 cars ahead. And over the course of a few hours, which in a lifting context you could say is a couple years, that guy is going to be long fucking gone compared to where I'm at my current rate. So just something to think about, right? And don't get too fed up and caught up in the fact that, like, bulking's a bit tricky and it's a lot of effort. I don't like the idea of dieting because it's hard. I don't want to be hungry all the time. Like, try not to get caught up on the negatives, because the positives are so much more valuable. So if you can get over those, few kind of tricky parts of it, then all you got to do is basically wait and reap the rewards. But I think that's all I got to say there, dieting wise. I am certainly on track to continuing this pursuit of leanness, even though that was the title of yesterday's video. Never stops. Well, it never stops until it does in a few months. But until then, it never stops. So I will see you for a cheeky arm day tomorrow. And I think a rest day is in order pretty soon. If not tomorrow, the next day. Because I can tell that my legs are getting kind of accumulating fatigue. Not just regular soreness. And I think that's to do with the fact that, I just don't have as many calories in my system. So we'll see. When a rest day really is necessary, I'm not going to hesitate. Well, I might hesitate a little, but I'm going to try not to hesitate and do what's best for the results that I'm aiming for. So until then, make sure you start doing a quick 30-minute activity nearly daily, or at least a few times a week, that is not weight-based training. Right? And I think we both know what I'm talking about. So I'll see you tomorrow.